So I would like to pass over to our speaker for today, Tanja Schwanck, who is a PhD researcher from the University of Aberdeen and will be talking to us all about her PhD research and project. So handing over to you now, Tanja.
Thank you very much. I'm just trying to start my presentation. There we go. Can everyone see that? Lovely. Okay, yeah, great that you guys are joining me today for this talk. I would love to tell you a little bit about the flapper skate, how Scotland is protecting this animal, and also a little bit about my work, but I won't make it too much about genetics today, but a little bit just so you get an idea of how I'm using genetics to help conservation. A little bit about me in the beginning. I'm Tanja Schwanck. I'm a PhD student who came here to the University of Aberdeen. I'm originally German and Dutch by blood, but I say by now I'm also a little bit Scottish by heart because I really enjoy living here. I've been here for the last 3 years, and working with Scotland's nature has really been a joy so far. So I hope I will continue doing that for a while. Throughout all my studies, I was always very interested in marine conservation and genetics, and that has followed me around. So I have done research in genetic diversity of fire corals. I've researched genetic connectivity between stingray populations. And now in my PhD research, I'm looking into the genetic diversity and connectivity of the critically endangered flapper skate, which is home to the British Isles. And so I could call myself kind of a hybrid of a marine biologist and a conservation geneticist, which I don't mind at all. It's a great field to work in, and I will explain you a little bit about it later. But first of all, I would like really to introduce the flapper skate as an animal. But before I will even start on that, I would like to know from you if you have ever heard of the flapper or the common skate before you came across this talk, just so I get an idea how many people actually know the species. Oh, I get a lot of yeses. I'm very excited. Yeah, that might be everyone. So good to know. So many people have already heard about it before. That makes me really happy because with a lot of people, when I tell them about the flapper skate, they've never heard about it before, or the common skate, but it's great that most of you have at least come across that name before. And yeah, the flapper skate is really an amazing animal. There we go. So it is, like sharks, a cartilaginous fish. Everyone needs a reminder what cartilage feels like. You can squish your ear or squish your nose, and all their body is made out of cartilage instead of bones, which has its advantages and disadvantages, but they are quite cool animals. And the flapper skate, especially because it's the biggest skate that lives in Europe, it is growing up to 230 centimeters long, sometimes even longer. And it is actually a predator. Often skates and rays are associated with digging up little crabs from the ground or something, but actually the flapper skate also sometimes eats small sharks like spiny dogfish or small spotted cat sharks. So sharks have to be very, very wary of these animals actually. But there was a lot of confusion about the common skate and the flapper skate. So formerly, the flapper skate was known as the common skate, but researchers found actually that the common skate, all the animals they identified as a common skate are 2 species. So they are the blue and the flapper skate, which we now know for about a decade. And when you look at the 2 species, you might think they look quite different from the patterns. When you look at the size on the left side, we have the blue skate that reaches about 145 centimeters in total length, and the flapper skate reaches about 230 centimeters in total length. They are also very different in size. The problem was whenever trawlers would get up those skates during fishing, they would mostly see adult blue skates and young flapper skates. So the flapper skates, since they get so big, have the same size as blue skates when they're still not mature at all, and that often causes their patterns to not be as defined as it is when they are adults. So that makes it very confusing. But by now they know, okay, it's two different species, and they also have noticed there were signs before that it's two different species that they didn't really take into account. They didn't really thought about it more. When you look at the right picture of the flapper skate, you see that it has these appendages on the back. It's genitalia. It's a male flapper skate, so it has claspers, which is the male genitalia of skates or sharks. And actually, when a biologist in 1926 was comparing blue skates and flapper skates, he already noticed that the claspers were not developed in same size skates. So he already noticed, okay, there is something different with them, but he was not aware that he was looking at juvenile, so immature flapper skates and already adult blue skates. So we already had signs it's two different species, but as I said, it took them quite a while to really say, okay, it's two species. And now we have kind of the problem that all the research that had been done, all the numbers we have of fisheries, they were all not for one species, but for two, and it's hard to separate this again. So our info on the species are a little bit confused, but there's a lot of research happening now. So for example, colleagues have found out that the flapper skates like it more in coastal areas, while the blue skate likes it a little bit more offshore. You can see on the picture here all these little, the little black triangles, those are the flapper skates, and the blue ones are the blue skate. So we see there's a little bit of a divide. And the flapper skates are especially abundant on the Scottish coast. So Scotland is really a special place for them. You also have some down south in the Celtic Sea, but very rarely, not as often as the blue skate. So the Scottish west coast and north coast are really the place to be for the flapper skate. But since there has been quite a lot of fishing, overfishing, and also bycatch affecting the flapper skates and the blue skates, the common skate in general, the complex of the common skate has reduced a lot in populations. Both species are now considered critically endangered. And that's not only because they have been fished so much, but it's also because they can't recover as well. And I will talk a little bit about why that is. So why is the flapper skate especially so vulnerable to overfishing? And that's because we have in ecology something we call K strategists and R strategists. So when you compare these two strategies of life, basically, you will see the K strategist has a long life, the R strategist has a short life. K strategist matures late, while the R strategist matures earlier. And I think you might already get a picture and an idea which animal might fit in which category. We have few offspring for the K1, we have many offspring for the R1. So when you think, for example, about a blue whale who only gets one calf at the time and also not every year, but while mice, for example, can reproduce several times a year, you can see who's the K and who's the R strategist. They also often invest more in offspring, so they are gestating for a longer time, or they're caring more about their animals. For example, a human is also a classic K strategist. So that makes animals very vulnerable, and it makes it also hard to cope when there's a lot of overfishing, for example, happening. So the flapper skate can definitely be put more into the category of a K strategist. There was a study just recently that looked again at size and age correlation of the animals. The tricky thing is they get very old and they get long, very, very long, and it's hard to actually follow around a skate that lives about 200 meters deep. So out of lots of different data points that we're able to simulate kind of a curve, how long it takes a flapper skate to get to which length. And they are considered mature, so ready to mate and reproduce in females at almost 2 meter lengths. And now they found out that they reached that at age of average 21 years. So they grow for 20 years before they even get any offspring. And they are estimated to grow 47 years old, the females, and while the males only get 28 years old, but still they get very old. they don't reproduce often, they reproduce very late in life. So it's hard for them to cope when a lot of them are taken out of the ocean at the same time. And so the last point was the more investment in offspring. That's luckily for the flapper skate, not so much of a thing. He's not investing himself a lot of energy into the offspring because they're laying eggs. So the offspring are developing in the eggs. But this is obviously also a place where they're very vulnerable. An egg is laying around. If it's in a, I will say, disadvantageous spot, it will be caught by trawling or by dredging or anything like this. So it's also a vulnerable state for the flapper skate. And so here just a picture of what a skate egg actually looks like. That they lay eggs is actually quite advantageous for us, again, conservation work, because the Shark Trust, for example, is collecting a lot of information on flapper skate eggs and other eggs of sharks and skate. So they will, when they're empty, they will wash up on beaches and they are recorded a lot. So we have an idea where the animals are actually distributed. And you can see the flapper skate has a very, very long egg. So it's over 20 centimeters long. And so yeah, you can imagine it is quite vulnerable in this state when it's just laying around. So I have a question for you, just to estimate, how long do you think a flapper skate egg is actually laying around, gestating until it hatches? How long does it remain in this vulnerable state? So I have a couple suggestions for you in a poll that Beck is hopefully starting now. Can't start the clock, but that's okay. We'll just see. There are not that many people. So we will know approximately whenever. Oh, that's very divided. That is interesting. Okay, 20 of 21 people have voted. So we can, I don't know if everyone sees the results, I guess so. So we have, yeah, pretty much everything represented. Most people said 6 months. And it's actually 18 months. So the longest possibility I gave you here. We know that it's about 18 months because Nature Scott and Sons were actually able to get hands on an egg that was just laid by a female and held it in an aquarium on the west coast of Scotland. And they kept it at the temperature of the outside to really mimic basically all the environmental conditions it would normally stay in. And after 18 months, this little flapper skate of 27 centimeter length finally hatched. And that was really exciting, but it's also really worrying to know that this egg is laying around for 18 months and might get damaged by someone. But it is really good to know that they are this vulnerable to further plan any conservation. So, and this is where we talk about now, how is the flapper skate now actually protected? Because it's considered critically endangered. And good thing is landing bans, so fishing and bringing it to shore and selling and eating it has been banned across most of its distribution. So we remember they are distributed on the west coast of Scotland and a little bit in the Celtic Sea in the north of Scotland. And they have actually been banned to land. So the common skate, not only the flapper skate, but also the blue skate, they are banned to be landed almost everywhere. We have some recordings from flapper skate actually also from the Azores. Those are the islands that are in the left bottom corner. So there they are banned to land as well, which is definitely a very, very necessary and good step to protect them. This has been in place for quite a while. But Scotland took it a little bit further and also created a marine protected area for the flapper skate specifically on the west coast of Scotland. This is the marine protected area Lochsuna to the Sound of Jura, where a very dense population of flapper skate lives, and they ban trawling, they ban dredging in most of its area, which is one of the highest protection marine protected areas can get. So it's quite a good thing. Further, we also found an egg nursery site in the inner sound of Skye. And because the conservationists in Scotland found it so important to protect those eggs as quickly as possible, they were able to implement a temporary protection site there. So for 1 year, the site is definitely protected until March next year, and they're currently reviewing the possibilities to protect it further. Because it's a site full of eggs, I think they found almost 100 eggs. Amazing. So we hope that this site stays protected. And last but not least, there is a great monitoring program with recreational anglers in the marine protected area on the West Coast. And that is actually really, really helpful. So I will talk a little bit more about that. Recreational angling is a very important hobby in the UK, and skates have been very, very popular amongst British anglers because they're big, they're heavy, and they are also difficult to get up. I tried it myself, it is not easy. And a couple of years ago, they would bring back the skate to shore to weigh them, etc. But now it's all catch and release. So they're catching the skate and throwing them back into the water immediately. And that really helps actually with the monitoring of them. So just to say beforehand, anglers were actually the ones who flagged up this area as an interest for protection because they knew where their skates were, where we have a lot of skates. So they said, hey, this is a great area. There are a lot of animals here. This might be worth for some more protection. And now when people go out with chartered angling boats in the marine protected area, the skippers, some of these skippers are working with Nature Scott, and they tag the skate with pit tags. For those people who don't know what pit tags are, it's the same tags that goes into a cat or a dog at the vet. So exactly the same technology. The skippers have a pit tag reader that reads the tag out, has a number, and notes down the time and date. And yeah, we have a great catalog of information on recaptures of these animals. For those who are not going out with angling charters, they can also take pictures of the skate because they noticed now that based on the nice patterns that skate have, you can actually identify the individual. So it's almost like a fingerprint for skates. And this is amazing. And we have a great database now called Skate Spotter that Nature Scott and SAMS implemented, where anglers can upload those pictures and they will then be matched to the animal. And just so you see how similar or different skates are, I would like you to try and identify the right skate. And I think Beck will start a poll. We'll just see if people are available. Yeah, you probably have to do the poll a little bit into a corner to better see it. Yeah, it's not that easy, but once you know what to look for, it is really, really nice how you can identify them based on the spot patterns. Now we have 12 of 20, some more. Beck, do you see a red line on the screen? I don't know if I did that by accident. There we go. Okay. So 16 of 20 have answered. Some more, we'll wait 10 more seconds. Oh. Okay. So yeah, the majority got it right. It was number B. Number B is the right skate. Oops. Yeah. So number B is the same skate as this one. And you see, for example, when you look at the spots on the nose, those 4 very prominent spots, they already are a great indicator. So yeah, this is very helpful, and this has given us a lot of information over time now. There we go. So just so you orientate yourself a little bit. So this is a map on the right side of the west coast of Scotland, not the whole one, obviously, but the part where the marine protected areas. We have the town of Oban here. If you've never been there, definitely go. It's beautiful. We have Fort William here, and this green area is a marine protected area. And one very important spot where we have most monitoring happening is the Firth of Lorn. And in the Firth of Lorn, we have 2 skippers who go out and tag the animals and scan the animals. So that's why we have a lot of data from there. And just to give you a little bit of insights on what we have learned over the years so far is female skates are more likely to be recaptured and tend to remain in the same area than males. It's just a small tendency, but still you definitely can see a difference there. Over 100 females have been recaptured 5 or more times, 27 of those even 10 or more times. A lot have been recaptured almost 20 times. I think 2 or 3 have been captured more than 20 times. And when you look at males, they might have not as many males might have been recaptured so much, but there's, for example, 1 male who has been recaptured 25 times between 2016 and 2021. So lots of recaptures, which shows us they do well when it comes to angling and when it comes to pit tagging. And we've learned a lot about how they like it in the marine protected area, which is they really like the environment there. And they stay there for quite a while. Something about the environment is just really appealing to them. And I mean, that's a great thing because we know, okay, we're protecting animals here, they stay in the protected area, they can reproduce here, etc. So for the MPA population, it's really good. But now the question is this which is the only permanent protection we have at the moment for the flapper skate, is that actually enough for the whole species, for all the flapper skates? And that's a little bit of the tricky part, because you might remember from the beginning, we have flapper skates in the north of Scotland, on the west coast of Scotland. We have them a little bit north of Ireland, and we also have them down south in the Celtic Sea. So what about these other animals? Are they benefiting at all from the protection in the MPA, which was a little bit of the hope? Because the thing is now, if we know that animals tend to stay in one specific area, the population might get very isolated from the rest of the animals. They might not intermix or even repopulate. So this is a sad thing. In the MPA, they might reproduce very nicely because they're so well protected, but they wouldn't replenish animals outside if they're isolated from them, if they don't go outside. And also it might lead to inbreeding risks. So if they're not going out mating with other animals, they will only mate with animals inside a small area, which might then cause a loss of genetic diversity because they're not mixing with anyone else. And genetic diversity is what I will talk a little bit more about now. But a question for you first. Do you currently consider genetic variability to be important for conservation of a species? I think Beck will start another poll on this. This makes my heart melt. Yeah, I think it's, so we have 18 of 20 are already unanimous in saying yes, genetic variability is important for conservation of a species. I'm really glad you're saying this because it definitely is. And it has been often not recognized in a lot of international programs when it comes to guidelines for conservation. Genetic variability is sometimes very much left out of it. So it is definitely important because if you have many genetic variants in a species available, the chances are just higher that part of the species will be able to adapt to environmental changes. And we know environmental changes are upon us in the future. So it is very important to have many different variants that might be more likely to survive and to further adapt to these changes. So that's something I'm personally very interested in, and Scotland is interested in that as well. So I'm working with Nature Scot and Marine Scotland. They have launched this project with the University of Aberdeen, where I will look into the genetic diversity of the flapper skate. So the main questions I'm basically asking are, how genetically diverse are the animals inside the MPA? How much are we protecting this genetic diversity? And are they related and sharing genes with animals outside? So is it beneficial to the animals outside that we're protecting them there? And to answer these questions, we have to look into the DNA. And the good thing is DNA is a code. You might know binary codes, you might know the Zodiac killer code, and DNA is not much different. There is a code as well. I won't go deeper into it. I will just say there is a code, AGTC. Those are the 4 letters the code is made up of. And you might even remember Mr. DNA from Jurassic Park, who explained DNA to the visitors. Even he already showed the code of the DNA when he was explaining that. So this is what DNA is made of, and this is what we can use to learn more about genetic diversity of animals. So now we know we have these letters, but a genome is very, very big. So a human genome is made up of 3 billion of these letters. Great white sharks, their genomes are made of 4.6 billion of these letters. So lots and lots of information that you can't even look into. But the most of this information, when you look at the right side, I have a little cell here. And you see the light blue part, this is in nucleus. So there is the biggest part of the genome, which is in your chromosomes that you get inherited from both your mother and your father. But this is not the only part of a cell that actually has DNA. The red little things you see, you might remember them as mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. And those have some DNA as well, actually. And this is actually quite nice to use to investigate genetic diversity. They're also quite nice. They are inherited from they are quite conserved, but they're still mutating. So you will get some variants, but not as many. And they are much smaller. So the genome of a mitochondria, as well in humans as well as in skate cells, it's only about 17,000 of letters of code. So it's not that much. But as I said, they are not unique per individual because they are not intermixed and they are not that long. But they have a great potential to show some genetic diversity, and they are very, very often used to get a first insight into genetic diversity and connectivity in animals, plants, anything. So what I will do is I will read out a piece of the mitochondrial genome. So the piece is just 700 of the letters long, but it tells us already a lot about genetic diversity. And I will read out these pieces and then compare the codes I will find, which looks about like this. So this is obviously just a little subset of my 700 letters. But you see here basically how it works. You have this code of letters. Here it's just A, T, and C because there were just no G's in that region. And then every row is a different individual, and you compare them, and you will see, oh, once in a while there's a difference. And every time there's a difference, obviously the code is unique. It's just a different code, and every unique code is a genetic variant. So I will compare all these codes to each other, and then I will find a specific number of genetic variants across all the animals I'm looking at. And in my case, or in case of flapper skate, it was 16 unique codes, so 16 genetic variants among 321 skates, which is a fine number. It's not overly high, but it's enough to get a first insight into the genetic diversity. And we want to know now how many of these genetic variants does the MPA have in comparison to others? Because we want to know if they are as diverse as other places because they seem so isolated. And we want to know if they share the genetic variants. So I have a map here that will display all the different genetic variants and how they're distributed amongst different locations. And just to explain how the graph works, you see those colorful circles. Every color is a genetic variant, and the size of the circle indicates how many animals harbor that genetic variant. So the bigger, the more animals. The little pink dot you see, this is just one animal having this genetic variant. And this, to display it like this, actually helps us also understand how balanced genetic diversity is within the populations. So just as an example, the top one, that would be unbalanced diversity. You have a lot of the one genetic variant, but only few of the others, while on the bottom one, you see all the 4 genetic variants have quite a similar amount of animals that showed them. So it's more balanced diversity like this. And we will just go through every population one by one now to see how genetically diverse they are. So we will start with the north coast of Scotland, where I had quite a few animals, and we found 12 genetic variants out of the 16, so actually quite a lot. And you can also see the dark green and the dark red might be a little bit bigger than the others, but it is quite equally distributed. It's quite a nice, balanced and variable population out there. On the west coast of Scotland, we have a few less. We have 9 genetic variants out of the 16. There is a little bit more of the dark red ones than others, but still it's not too bad. In the Sea of the Hebrides, we have 10 genetic variants. We have here definitely quite a dominance of the dark red and the dark green one. And then when you go down to the south, to the Celtic Sea, you have only 8 genetic variants. But this might be very likely because we also had very few samples from here. So from the Celtic Sea, we only had 20 samples because flapper skates are not very common there. While from the other sides, that the ones that are already displayed, we had about 40. But still, the Celtic Sea is quite nicely balanced, quite diverse for the size of the sample set. So yeah, they look all quite diverse and relatively balanced. And then we come to the MPA. The MPA is a place where we have most samples from, more than 150 samples. And we only have 7 genetic variants out of the 16. And that was quite shocking. And then you also see they are not very nicely balanced. The dark red, the dark red is quite common, but the bright red and the dark green, they are really, really dominant in the sample set. And then you might also notice the bright red wasn't very common in any of the other populations. So the bright red is actually a genetic variant that's almost exclusive to the marine protected area. So yeah, we were like, oh, this is a very interesting pattern, but also not what we were hoping for. We were obviously hoping that the marine protected area would be a little bit more genetically diverse and also sharing genes with other populations. But that's what might have happened because the animals just like to stay in that one area. Or there are a lot of reasons that can lead to this kind of pattern. So obviously we were wondering, okay, why do we have so little genetic diversity here? And one thing that happens, especially when populations collapse, when there's a lot of population decline because of overfishing, etc., you can get a genetic bottleneck. That basically means you have a lot of variants in the beginning, but the populations are very, very reduced to only a few animals. And those few animals obviously can only have a few variants, so the other ones were just lost. And then when these animals reproduce again and build up the population again, they only have those few variants. So that might have happened for the MPA, for example, in one idea. Another idea is there's somehow a barrier between the marine protected area and other locations that just didn't allow an intermixing and just left the MPA very isolated and inbreeding. It is always quite hard to imagine a barrier in the ocean, but it is hard also to investigate the animals, how they live, what they need. You don't know if there's an area where there's just missing resources that they don't want to go through. So there might be invisible barriers to us that are very, very real barriers for them. And also what has been found for sharks, for example, is that some animals just behave different than others. They are instinct driven, but the instincts can also differ between different populations of the same species. So the animals in the MPA might be just like, it's great here, why should I move? We will all stay here. And when other animals come in, they might have not a great chance to really settle down there because there are already a lot of animals. So there are a lot of different ideas. There are many more ideas to explain this. But what we now know is that we have this very little genetic diversity and connectivity to the outside as well when we look at the marine protected area. And we did all this because we want to know what it means for conservation, obviously. We want to know, okay, what does this mean now for the flapper skate as a species? And the questions I asked were, how genetically diverse are the animals inside the MPA? And the answer is not very in comparison to other sites, which means we are only protecting very little of the genetic diversity of the flapper skate at the moment. And the other question was, are they related in sharing genes with the animals outside? Only a little. So again, not ideal, not, just not the perfect situation. So this is definitely something we have to think about in the future if we want to further adapt conservation management of the flapper skate to make it more efficient, to also ensure the protection of genetic diversity. And yeah, the question is, what comes next? I'm by now looking at more than just the mitochondrial genome. You remembered I just looked at one little part of this one little mitochondrial genome. And now I'm actually looking at more than 4,000 pieces all over the genome of the flapper skate, which is great because it gives us a unique genetic fingerprint of every single skate I'm looking at. I'm looking at 360 flapper skates now. And what we will do is, for example, we'll do something similar to the paternity test because we want to look for close relatives like siblings and parents and their offspring. And that will allow us to learn more about where do they disperse after they're born or when they grow up. Are they in different places? Are they all in the same place? It will teach us a lot more about the life history of the animals, and then we can also understand how they move around during the life. And another thing we will look at is we will look for genetic variants that are somehow correlated to environmental conditions. So if we find specific genetic variants where we have specific habitat available, that might mean there might some adaptation going on, there might be adaptive patterns, and that again is very important to know if we want to protect the genetic diversity in order to help the flapper skate persist long term. And all this work is happening in collaboration with Nature Scot and Marine Scotland. So all this information will be used for conservation management, will be considered when management of the flapper skate is further discussed. If you want to know more about the flapper skate in general and my work, the genetic work especially, I can recommend following these sites. I think Olivia will put the links into the chat box. So we have from Nature Scot just a lot of general information about the flapper skate, about the monitoring with anglers, and about other studies about movement they're doing. So they're a great resource to learn a lot about the flapper skate. And on the right, you see my project Flapper Skate Family Ties with the Save Our Seas Foundation. So they are funding my work to look into the close relatives and to learn more about the life history of flapper skates. So this is great to have a look into once in a while if there are any updates. You can also follow me on Twitter under the Twitter handle @SchwanckTanja. And I will definitely post whenever there are some updates of my research. So before I close, I would just like to know if you can tell people a few more things than you knew before you came to this talk about the flapper skate. And Beck will start another poll for that. Ah, love it. Thank you. Good to know. Yeah, very good. Very good. Okay, that makes me very, very happy. And just to say at the end, all this work wouldn't be possible with so much support I'm getting. I have so many colleagues and great supervisors who help me do this work. And special thanks obviously also goes to Lee Taylor, who's one of the skippers in the marine protected area, and all the other anglers who are involved, because they invite me on the boats. I can go and collect genetic samples when they fish this gate, which makes my life so much easier. And it's a really great collaboration that's going on. And I have a lot of supporters that are also displayed on the bottom. So thanks to those. And thank you all for your attention. I'm looking forward to any questions, and I hope I can answer them the best possibility. And yeah, thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, Tanja. I think you might have inspired a whole load of flapper skate conservationists in the group. So definitely something for us to think about, even if you don't live in the area of Scotland, obviously can help. So if anyone does have any questions they would like to ask, if you would like to virtually raise your hand, we can come to you and you can ask in person, but we'll also go to Olivia, who I believe has some questions from the chat as well.
Yeah, so thank you, fab talk, and yeah, really interesting stuff. I've got a couple of questions. To start off with, I've got one from Terry, which is, are skates liable to be caught by commercial fishing? Is the landing ban good enough to prevent death from commercial fishing?
That is a good question. So they are still sometimes ending up as bycatch on commercial fishing, definitely. It's hard to prevent because, especially with mixed fisheries in lots of British waters, for example, they will end up in trawling. They are supposed to be thrown back immediately, and I'm pretty sure most fishermen are really good at that. Sometimes, sadly, in some areas, on some boats, they will string a rope around the tail and then just cut the rope off when they let the flapper skate drop back into the water, which causes the tail to die off eventually because they're growing so much. So it's not ideal for the skate. Still, what's happening there needs to be more awareness for fishermen how to handle the skate on the boat, but most are aware that they have to throw them back. And I mean, yeah, the landing ban is definitely, it makes a big difference. We definitely see more skate since the landing ban has been introduced. So that is definitely already a big advantage.
Good to hear. And then the second one from Terry is, how do you get the samples for the genetic research?
So I have a personal home office license to take genetic tissue samples. So I had to go through several courses, ethical, etc., to be allowed to do that. I take a little fin clip, which is, yeah, the size is about this, maybe, from the back of the fin, which grows back incredibly fast. Since we have those many recaptured animals, we can see actually a couple of weeks later the same animal, how it was already grown half back. So and I'm mostly going out with anglers. Sometimes I'm chartering an angling boat myself, which means I also have to fish the skate myself, which is a lot of hard work, I have to say. So yeah, that's where I get samples, but I also get samples, for example, from Marine Scotland, who are doing surveys, as well as CIFAS. They're doing regular scientific surveys, and they have the licenses as well to take samples. So from them, I'm getting samples as well.
Thank you. That is the questions out of the chat. If anyone's got any more, feel free to put them in there or raise your hand.
Yep, if you do have any questions, you can come and ask them. I did have a question as well. So do you think, Tanja, one of the possible solutions is to create more MPAs, or would that help? Or is it actually the MPAs causing the issue?
Yeah, I mean, the MPA is definitely in a good place, because even though it might not be as diverse and not as well connected, we have a genetic variant that we almost don't have anywhere else. So it is absolutely crucial to continue to protect the animals in the marine protected area. It might be worse. It is always hard because you have to consider a lot of factors. We at the moment don't know if the animals in the MPA are just behaving way differently than animals in the north of Scotland, for example. They might be much more moving around. So a marine protected area doesn't always make sense, because if the animals are moving around more, you can't really make one static marine protected area for them. it's definitely worth looking at the nursery sites further. We have also some nursery sites in the north of Scotland, because I think that is one very vulnerable state that might be worth further protecting. But it is, yeah, with just the genetics, I wouldn't recommend doing doing a marine protected area, and there needs to be much more info on the movement before that. But that's great. We have a lot of colleagues at the University of St Andrews, for example, who do movement studies, and also now the Queen's University of Belfast started investigating the movements some more of flapperskate, because they have them in North Ireland as well. So we hope with all that information collated, we will be able to recommend proper and most efficient protection for the flapperskate eventually.
Yeah, great. The question has just come through in the chat as well. So Miriam would like to know, how long can skates survive out of the water?
They can survive relatively long. So we aim, obviously, when the recreational anglers aim to only keep them on there for a few minutes at most. Sometimes they are on there for longer. A colleague of mine is doing acoustic tracking, for that you have to perform a little surgery on them. So they are longer than 10 minutes on the boat, and they can survive this very fine as well. But the goal is always to put them back as soon as possible, and to also water them. So that's what we do when they are more than a couple minutes on boat. We always fill their spiracles with water, with fresh water directly from the ocean. So they get oxygen through, I'm missing my English words today. So they're getting oxygen directly through that. So, but for example, also something like sun isn't their favorite thing. So when the sun is out, they should be thrown back quicker, because they don't like it to be warm. So it's easier, for example, when it's colder, then it's not a big deal for them, as long as they're watered.
Great. Does anyone have any further questions? You can put them in the chat if you don't feel comfortable coming on, or if you would like to unmute yourself and ask, you are more than welcome to. No, I think that's probably it.